We completed 2 topics yesterday. Firstly was the linkages between extremism and development, and second was the various state and non-state actors and the threats imposed to India's internal security by them. So basically, when we're looking at internal security, the basic framework is looking at it from a developmental point of view. That is what we understood yesterday. Most of the problems are linked to lack of development, inequalities, as well as influence from certain actors for their political or economic benefits. So any definition, anything that is asked in the paper has to be answered with this perspective, and it has to be linked with other dimensions of security, such as economic security, such as health security, such as the financial security of the country, the physical security, the digital security. Every aspect of security has to be seen in an interlinked way, and that is what we are going to do. So now we have the rest of the remaining topics today, which we'll see one by one. And for every topic, the framework remains the same. First, we'll see what are the dimensions that the previous year questions asked on the topic. Then we'll look at what kind of answers do we need to write, how do we need to structure the answers, what data is important, what quote can be important, what new development is important, and what are the various ways of answering the question in a more academic way so that we can gain the maximum of marks. So let us begin with the first topic of today, that is the role of cybersecurity, communication networks, and role of media and social media in creating challenges to internal security. So first we'll understand what this term is, the term communication network. We'll define everything because definitions can act as a great fodder for your introductions, or if a question is directly asked on what exactly is X, Y, or Z. So sometimes UPSC tends to ask what is social media. In 2013, they had asked this question, what exactly is social media? So you need to know the theoretical definitions of these things so that you can write a good, effective answer and effective definition. So firstly, we'll see what are the questions that have been asked from the part of communication networks. Within the communication networks part, what UPSC has largely focused upon is basically social media. So the role of social media, the role of various kinds of threats that are posed by various kinds of actors through social media, and how the government can counter or challenge those and basically respond to those threats in an effective way. In general, UPSC has also asked what are the challenges posed to internal security through the communication networks. That means it is an overarching answer which will include every aspect of what a communication network is and what all types of communication networks are present here. So basically, first we'll just try to define what a communication network is. Communication network is nothing but a network wherein there are interlinkages between the user, certain devices who use them, then all these devices and other users are linked through a common platform of an application or a software and interlinked with the lines of communication, which in modern day are basically it refers to the internet, which is the most prevalent line of communication or way of communication in the present day and age. So basically all this interlinkage between the devices, users, the application or the software connected with the internet in a wired or a wireless way. So internet could be wired or it could also be wireless. So both constitute, and all of this constitutes a communication network. Basically, when it comes to the definition that you should look at is what the IT Act of India says, what the Information Technology Act 2000 says is this. It doesn't talk directly about communication networks, but it mentions something called critical information infrastructure. So critical information infrastructure, which is basically the communication networks, it refers to those infrastructure and those basically resources, the computer resources, etc., the internet, whatever the most broadest kind of elements in this. They whose disruption or whose incapacitation or destruction has the ability to basically it basically give a great impact on national security and threaten India's internal security. So these are critical infrastructure to the internal security of our country. These are basically referring to computer resources and information technology resources whose destruction or incapacitation can lead to a threat to the internal security of a country. So this is how we can define critical information infrastructure or communication networks. What is the importance of these if such a question is posed? The importance is manifold in today's day and age. Number one, they act as lines of communication, basically increasing connectivity of information and connectivity of ideas. Then the communication network can also act as great connectors for the economy. So they can act as boost to the economy in the form of, for example, the UPI, the Unified Payment Interface, which is again a sort of a communication network wherein finances can be transferred from one person to another or one entity to another. The other aspect or the other importance of communication networks is in terms of education. For example, the rise of edtechs and technology in education through e-lectures, etc. Next comes the importance in the sphere of governance, wherein e-governance, that is electronic governance through the medium of the internet and the information technology network, that is all based on the role of communication networks. A prime example is the Pragati portal and the Umang portal for various purposes. Then another key importance of these communication networks is in the case of the health sector. For example, the latest example which is being developed is the UWIN portal, that is for Universal Immunization Program, a portal on the lines of the CoWIN, basically based on the CoWIN portal which was used for COVID vaccines, is now being implemented and rolled out for Universal Immunization Program of the country and extended to the pregnant ladies as well as the children for their universal immunization needs. Apart from that, even the power sector is connected through smart grids, through information or through these information networks or these critical information infrastructure. So all these communication networks have, all the communication networks have these common significances from the point of view of the country. Now, what else needs to be understood are the threats to these communication networks. What are the sources of the threats and what are the causes of the threats that can be caused to them? Since their characteristics is that they are interconnected and distributed, hence their vulnerability also remains high to various threats. Now, if any sort of threat is asked in the topic of internal security, we don't have to think much. We'll use our syllabus to generate the kind of threats. So threats from external state actors, from non-state actors, from other communication networks or technologies, threats due to organized crime, threats due to terrorism, threats which are due to the various geopolitical issues, financial threats, etc. So basically, we can break down the topic of threats into this framework wherein we'll be able to divide it into 7 or 8 points and into such points which are mutually exclusive to each other, and they can help generate many dimensions for the answer. Basically, types of threats, in terms of the technological threats can be the various viruses, the malware, that is the broad term for it, and the various kinds of threats from various proxies, the various data hackers, data miners, shared computers, zombie computers, etc. So that is basically the framework where we'll see the threats coming from. And if a common way forward is to be recommended for any answer in this question that can be asked, then again the approach will be multi-pronged as suggested by the second ARC for all internal security threats, that the approach must involve multiple agencies, multiple stakeholders, and it should be at multiple levels. So for example, if a question arises on information security or cyber security, then a multi-layered protection system is a way forward, which protects the networks at the top, the devices, and then the users. So if we take a level approach, as we had seen certain frameworks for answer writing in the environment section, we can use the level approach here to recommend the various way forwards at every level. Apart from that, there are initiatives that can be targeted at the users. For example, behavioral change through awareness. And that awareness can itself be through social media and the communication networks. So a behavioral aspect of the way forward and a non-behavioral aspect or a infrastructural aspect along with the policy aspect by implementing cyber security or information security initiatives like the National Cyber Security Policy, the IT Act, and various such measures that we will discuss in the next few sections. So basically, this is the simple framework in which we have to break down most of these questions. Now, first, let's see the topic of what is cyber crime or cyber security. So firstly, the one topic that UPSC directly mentions in the syllabus is cyber security. Now, cyber security again has to be seen through a certain select number of dimensions. So the topic is the basics of cyber security. In terms of what has been asked till now and what is frequently asked and repeatedly asked, because this section has a great weightage to your internal security answers. So firstly, what is asked is the kind of terms or the kind of types of cyber security threats. So there are certain terms or we can say types of cyber security threats. For example, cyber crime was asked one year. Then the term cyber warfare was asked a few years later. Apart from that, terms like cyber terrorism, cross-border cyber attacks have all been asked at some point or the other. So basically, anything which has cyber in it, that is added or added as a prefix to other terms to understand these various dimensions or these types of cyber security threats. So one is the question as to what are these. Then the common theme that is then asked, whatever type of cyber crime is picked up, then what can be asked is, how is the government prepared? Government's preparation status to tackle any of these. Then India's initiatives and our policy structure to tackle the issues of cyber security. Apart from that, a certain section on data security is also important because data information and information security are highly interlinked and repeatedly asked. Starting from the B.N. Sri Krishna Committee report to the Digital Data Protection Act 2023. Questions have been repeatedly asked from data security. Apart from that, something like the policies of National Cybersecurity Policy, the National Cybersecurity Strategy, all these have been asked repeatedly, along with various other special themes or special initiatives like the Cyber Dome project was asked 1 year. Another year, something called what is the importance of keeping data on cloud hosted servers for data security. This was asked in 5 to 10 years back. So basically the policy architecture, how the government is prepared, all these themes are very, very important when it comes to the topic of cyber security. Let's first define what is cyber security as we try to define every element of our syllabus. Cyber security is basically protecting our cyberspace, protection or giving security to our cyberspace, which is basically the critical information infrastructure as per the IT Act, from attack, damage, misuse, espionage, etc. From attack, damage, misuse, etc. Now, what is the cyberspace? That must be the next question in your mind. What exactly is cyberspace? Cyberspace is basically critical infrastructure consisting of the computer resources, the information technology that is at use connecting them, as well as the various devices that are, or the hardware that is part of the whole computer system. That is computer hardware and computer software. All these things combined together are called the cyberspace. So basically, the problem with the whole cyberspace or the information technology network at large is that there are multiple points of entry and exit. This enhances vulnerabilities from various angles, and hence it is tough to protect the whole cyberspace, also because of the rapid development of attack technologies faster than the defensive technologies. So at every point of time, hackers and cyber terrorists or cyber criminals are trying to figure out new ways to basically cause harm to these cyber resources and to the cyberspace. And that is done before a defense system is made against this issue. In terms of how these cybersecurity threats have evolved, the evolution comprises of a few steps. The information technology revolution occurred in the 1980s, wherein the production of semiconductors, the miniaturization of the integrated circuits that led to the birth of the personal computer. Earlier computers were large industrial appliances, but they got miniaturized and they penetrated into the whole world, connected by the World Wide Web or the internet. That first gave birth to the first type of cybersecurity threats that were the viruses. These viruses, they needed a host file like the biological virus to spread in the computer and cause any kind of nuisance from a serious to a less serious or a trivial level, but still they disrupted the cyber resources or the cyber networks. This evolved into something called the worms in 2000. These worms did not need a host file, and then they could be spreading across the whole computer network from device to device because of various lapses in the security systems. So then these worms was replaced in the 2010s, new kind of threats called botnets occurred. These were basically zombie computers who performed denial of service attacks or distributed denial of service attacks on information technology and information, critical information infrastructure networks. What this denial of service attack is it floods a server with a multitude of requests or multitude of information, overloads it and causes the failure of the whole computer network. If it is done to the distributed network of these zombie computers or the botnets, then it is called a distributed denial of service attack. Finally, today, these have evolved into threats like advanced persistent threats, insiders, etc. Basically, these are discrete threats. They get inculcated within the computer systems and the information security systems and lead to leakage of information as well as espionage. So their modus operandi is to act in a way that the users never get to know whether their information technology system or their computer system has been compromised. So that is a core feature of these networks. Now, once we look at the kind of technologies that have evolved in the space of cyber security, we must also look at what is the current dimension and the current problems regarding each of these elements. Apart from this, what we must understand is that there are certain pillars of cyber security. So basically, if the elements or the pillars of cybersecurity is ever asked, then you have to mention the CIA triad. The CIA triad is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability triad. That is, sensitive or strategic data sets should be restricted from unauthorized access. They should be confidential. There should be integrity in guaranteeing that information is unaltered, accurate, and remains untouched, and availability of communication channels and computer resources at all times so that no one can disrupt IT networks. CIA is combined with something called non-repudiation. CIA plus non-repudiation, that is technical validation through cryptographic digital signatures that prevent an actor from getting access to or getting authorship or execution of such sensitive information. So all these four form the pillars of the cyber security or the elements of cyber security. Now let's look at the critical information infrastructure, what it is and what is its significance. So again, like we said, the IT Act section 70 defines computer resources whose incapacitation, degradation, or destruction would exert a debilitating impact on national security, economic sovereignty, public health, or societal safety are called the critical information infrastructure. The National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center is the designated nodal agency under this IT Act to protect the critical information infrastructure of the country. What it consists of is power and energy sector, banking, finance and insurance, telecommunications, transport, government and defense, and health services. So all these become a part of the critical information infrastructure systems. We also need to make sure that we remember key incidents of breaches of internal security all across the dimensions of the syllabus. Why? Because UPSC tends to make the GS3 topics more and more specific. So for that, what they do is they ask specific examples from either a specific conference or a specific year or a specific initiative or a specific kind of internal security threats, just to make sure that the marks distribution becomes a little different from other papers. So what happens is that either if you know the examples regarding any of the threats, you're able to answer the question. If you don't know the information or the example, you will not be able to answer those questions. So what is it? Regarding the incidents that have happened in recent past, one was in Kudankulam nuclear power plant in 2019, where the systems were infected by D-Track malware, which compromised India's largest nuclear power plant power installation. Malware as a term is an umbrella term. It comprises of all these viruses, worms, insiders, etc., spyware, ransomware, the various kinds of threats. So these terms can also be asked. What is a spyware? Basically, it's a software, it's a malware that leads to espionage or leakages of information. What is a ransomware? These are basically softwares or malwares that are used to keep a PC or a information security system or an information technology system, IT system, under ransom, and an amount is basically demanded as ransom so that that system will be released from the clutches of those hackers or the ransomware. Apart from that, various other kinds of threats come under the topic of malware, which you hear from time to time, and which can be asked in your exams. Again, basically what we need to understand is whatever is asked in the form of your various definitions, they are key to your scoring good marks. Something like Trojans can be asked, that what are Trojans? Basically, Trojans are malware which are being disguised as genuine software or genuine applications. Similarly, what is a keylogger? A keylogger is a malware which actually tracks whatever keys are being pressed on the system. For example, if a password is being typed, then the keylogger keeps a track of whatever was being typed so that it can record that information and leak the passwords to other systems and to the various cyber criminals. So basically, terms like these have to be understood, and in terms of the internal security, the cyber security threats. So the Kudankulam nuclear power plant, then the AIMS New Delhi ransomware attack in 2022, where the patient registries and e-hospital servers were basically kept under ransom. Then the most famous is the Mumbai power grid failure in 2020, where Chinese state-linked hacking groups targeted Mumbai's power grid, leading to power failure. And finally, during Operation Sindoor, there were 1.5 million simultaneous distributed denial of service and malware attacks on India's critical information infrastructure. And cyberspace was then for the first time used as a domain of warfare in the realm of India-Pakistan relations. So if something like this is asked, then this data can be quoted in your answers to reflect your basic understanding and awareness about the issue. Now again, the cyber threat matrix that is consistently asked by UPSC. What is cyber warfare? Basically, these are state-backed operations utilizing computer technology to disrupt, damage or sabotage administrative, economic or military infrastructure of an adversary nature. So basically, warfare in the cyber domain is the cyber warfare. In terms of cyber warfare, the example of Operation Sindoor can easily be used to quote in your answers. So cyber warfare is one kind of warfare. Apart from that, there are other cyber security challenges which we'll see one by one. So cyber warfare can be defined as new form of warfare relating to the use of computer technology used to disrupt the activities of a state or organization with the object to carry out warfare. Now, other kinds of cyber warfare or cyber threats are cyber espionage, wherein the illicit penetration of secure data systems is carried out to exfiltrate strategic intelligence or military blueprints. Operation Side Copy in 2022-2020 targeted Indian defense and diplomatic personnel systems, and this was done by external and non-state actors. Then cyber crime, what is it? Basically, financially motivated illegal activities including phishing, ransomware, digital arrest scams, zero-click exploits, SQL injection, and man-in-the-middle attacks. So all of these need to be understood as to what they are, because these special terms can be asked by UPSC in their exam. So we already covered what is ransomware. Phishing is nothing but attracting the various users to click on certain links or certain basically those attractive pages or those certain attractive links which will lead to an attack on their cyber security system. So phishing is one such attack. Apart from that, what we look at in detail now next is digital arrest scams, because they are constantly asked and constantly in news because of how much they are being in prevalence in the present day. So in terms of looking at what are exactly all these scams, phishing, snooping, etc., they have to be understood in terms of their severity. Now, when it comes to the case of digital arrest scams, we'll look at a few things. Firstly, cyber crimes, one of the major subcomponents is cyber fraud. And a digital arrest scam is a part of this cyber fraud. So, a digital arrest scam is where people basically get under this form of arrest, which is called digital arrest by these so-called cyber criminals or these various nefarious actors. And what is done is that a lot of their information, their money, etc., is transferred to these actors by threatening them with certain dire legal and criminal consequences and posing as police officers or intelligence officers or officers from the government. This is done by actors who are operating from countries outside India, and yet they are posing as Indian government officials. Apart from that, there are certain other such issues which can be asked in your exam. For example, other cyber frauds, the various other kinds of cyber frauds that can be asked. So in terms of cyber crime, cyber frauds, and within cyber frauds comes digital arrest. Then comes something called big butchering, that is using the fake jobs or fake identities to carry out criminal activities. So fake jobs are offered, fake relationships are maintained on the internet to carry out these cyber frauds. Along with that, something called phantom hacking can be asked. All these have been directly mentioned by the government in various PIP releases. Phantom hacking is basically posing as tech support or government officials to take control of your systems or your computers in the guise of correcting some problem or some error. Apart from that, online betting and gaming, along with deep fakes generated using AI, and along with instant loan apps. They are all part of this whole gamut of cyber fraud. So instant loan apps, which are also in news from time to time because they give micro loans to especially vulnerable people or sections of society, and then once they are not able to repay those loans and they are given under very highly dubious conditionalities, then a lot of pressure is posed on them from the recovery agents, leading to various suicides and other such tragic happenings. Deepfakes also are in news because it involves the use of artificial intelligence to create fake videos or fake audio files and to be spread through social media to carry out fake propaganda and disturb the people. Apart from that, online gaming and betting has been, especially the money-based online games, have been banned by the Gaming Regulation Act of 2025. So in 2025, money-based online gaming was banned by the government. All these are basically various categories of cyber threats. Next is the threat of cyber terrorism. Basically, it is the use of internet infrastructure to launch deliberate large-scale attacks against information networks driven by political or ideological motives. So that is what is cyber terrorism. Now, again, a few more emerging challenges and technologies that need to be understood. Firstly is the 5G network rollout risks. That is, the attack surface has now been expanded because 5G works through Internet of Things. You will see that today your air conditioners, your vacuum cleaners, you have robot-based cleaners, dishwashers, refrigerators, all these are connected through the internet and they have some element of artificial intelligence. For example, ACs have this element of artificial intelligence where they can sense the size of the room, the number of people in the room, and change the cooling capacity. Robot-based vacuum cleaners, there was a recent incidence and data that millions of people's, basically the mapping of the home done by these robot vacuum cleaners, this data was stored in servers and this was leaked. So the blueprints of houses of various people, of millions of people across the world, was leaked because of a data breach from the servers of a robot vacuum cleaner company, which actually store the data for ensuring that the cleaning is done in a good way. So all these 5G technologies and the latest generation technologies, they increase the attack surface, and software defined networking vulnerabilities have also increased. So basically various softwares and their vulnerabilities are now more exposed. Then artificial intelligence and deep fakes and drones and unmanned aerial vehicles, all these are controlled through cyber networks and information security networks, and these are now used to drop weapons, ammunition, narcotics, and basically were also used to carry out various reconnaissance and survey during military operations. So all these are new challenges in technology and cyber security. Now, what is also repeatedly asked and what one needs to know is India's cyber security defense architecture. So basically, we have to define and describe the whole system of cybersecurity and what are the various organs and mechanisms through which it is being carried out. So firstly, we look at the legal statutory frameworks. Number one on the top comes the Information Technology Act, which is going to be soon replaced by the Digital India Act. Till the time this act is not passed, we'll quote the IT Act, but if till the time of your means the Digital India Act is passed during the monsoon session, then we will have to study new provisions on the basis of that. But still it forms the overarching framework, especially its section 69A, which empowers central government to restrict public access to digital content to safeguard sovereignty. And it is the legal basis for content takedown and blocking, and it is accepted under the reasonable restrictions under Article 19 Clause 2 towards freedom of speech and expression. Then come the DPDP Act 2023, which was based on the B.N. Sri Krishna Committee report on privacy. So basically, it is the Digital Data Protection Act, which regulates processing of digital personal data, involves elements such as informed, explicit, and withdrawable consent to companies to keep their data or even to the government to keep the data. Then data fiduciaries, that is basically those intermediaries who hold large amounts of data, they must have some responsibility and report breaches within 6 hours. And the Digital Protection Board of India can impose penalties up to rupees 250 crore. It is India's first comprehensive data protection law. Then recently, the IT rules were formulated in 2021 and further amended a few years later. They come under the IT Act, and they have also improved the cybersecurity by regulating social media intermediaries, making the fiduciaries, that is these large intermediaries who process and hold a lot of data, responsible for any such internal security threat or cybersecurity threat occurring from these platforms. For example, if a certain kind of propaganda attack through fake news or deepfakes is spread, then the fiduciary or the large data intermediary has a responsibility, and it mandates content takedowns and requires grievance redressal mechanisms from these large data fiduciaries. The 2023 amendment has established the PIB fact-checking unit, that is a statutory body which can actually give the clarifications regarding any fake news. So you'll see that the PIB fact-checking unit, from time to time, it releases certain documents dismantling the fake narrative against various government actions. So it's a regulatory framework basically for the social media platforms. Next comes the institutional architecture. What are the institutions involved in the cyber security framework? So in terms of institutions, the first is the CERT-In, which is the national nodal agency for responding to the cyber incidents. They track malware, they issue security advisories, and they run the Bharat NCX cyber drill to simulate attacks, which was one of the largest ones, was run in 2025, for us to remain prepared under these cyber threats. Then the National Cyber Security Coordinator, this comes under basically the National Security Advisory Board, and it operates under the National Security Council Secretariat. It coordinates cybersecurity policy across all ministries and advises the Prime Minister's office on such cyber threats. Then the India Cybercrime Coordination Center under the Ministry of Home Affairs, it is in Raj's office. It's the central node for tracking cyber crimes across 7 functional arms, including the 1930 helpline and the basically citizen reporting system for these cyber crimes. The 1930 is the helpline from the Government of India to ensure that you can report the citizen, the basic cyber frauds or cyber crimes. The Citizen Financial Fraud Reporting Management System and the National Cybercrime Reporting Portals are all part of this whole initiative. Then next comes the National Critical Infrastructure Information Infrastructure Protection Center. It is the nodal agency under the IT Act for information protection of critical information infrastructure. Then the Cyber Dome project, which was asked by UPSC a few years back. Basically, it was through by Kerala Police and in a public-private partnership model which linked law enforcement with ethical hackers. Basically, who are hackers? One needs to first understand. Hackers are nothing but individuals who have an intent of, who have a knowledge of computer systems, networks, and use it to find loopholes. So hackers are individuals with knowledge of computer systems and who use it to identify or exploit loopholes in the information technology network, and through that they can gain access to various computer systems and take their control without consent. So they can identify loopholes, access systems, and control them. Now, when it comes to hackers, there are various kinds of hackers. First are the black hat hackers. Then are the white hat hackers. And then the third category of hackers is the grey hat crackers. So the white hat hackers, basically they are ethical hackers who use this knowledge to check systems. So they are ethical hackers. They use their knowledge of hacking to check the integrity and the security level of an information technology system, of an IT system. The black hat hackers are also called crackers. They are the unethical ones who use this knowledge to gain unauthorized access and control these computer resources for their own personal gain. And then the grey hat hackers are basically neutral and they don't hack for monetary or financial gain, they just hack for fun. So the grey hat hackers, they do it for fun. The black ones do it for negative or criminal activities. So here the Kerala police, in a public-private partnership model, use these white hat hackers or the ethical hackers and tech companies and academia to build joint capabilities against emerging cyber threats. So basically, this was an example of public-private partnership that can help tide over certain cybersecurity threats. So it was a multi-stakeholder approach in solving the cybersecurity problem. Apart from this, we have to understand what other dimension can be used in their answers. So one more dimension that should and that will form an integral part of your answers will be what are the way forwards in this case. Firstly, we will see what is the status of India in terms of cybersecurity. First, we look at what are the issues or the threats that India faces specifically from cyber threats. So India is the second most cyber attacked country in the world after USA. First is USA and second is India. How we are vulnerable and why we are vulnerable? Because 86% households are connected to the various kinds of information security, information technology networks. India has 13% of all the cyber attacks in the world which occur here. Various kinds of fraud, scams are occurring through this. We have the second largest data theft in the world, and cyber security attacks have increased from 10 lakh per year to 22 lakh per year in 2024. So this data, certain graph can be made just to show our increasing threat matrix from cyber security issues or cyber security threats. This vulnerability is basically expressed in various sectors. It is expressed in the sectors of finance. Then one of the largest and the major sinks of attack or the targets of attack is the critical information infrastructure, then the health sector, and apart from that, various individuals as well as the telecom sector and the power sector, etc., which are all considered part of the critical information infrastructure. So they are the basic targets. We have seen the types of cyber frauds that occur here, and the nature of cyber crime within India is that it is concentrated in certain geographical hotspots. For example, Mewat. For example, Jamtara in Jharkhand. Ahmedabad, Hyderabad. So there are certain hotspots where people are, these networks or syndicates are operating from, which are carrying out these cyber attacks. It is not occurring all across the country. Now we have to look at what can be the way forwards for any question on cyber security. First way forward from a public's point of view is creating awareness. From the point of view of public or looking at the public as a major stakeholder, awareness on cyber attacks. So basically cyber awareness is needed to be spread, and social media can be a great way of spreading and improving cyber awareness in the country. Next, the Cyber Crime Coordination Center that needs to be operationalized. Portals like MyGov need to carry out digital literacy campaigns. Third, new data security models should be adopted. Something called the new data security model should be adopted, wherein there are two components. One is the data and one is the people. Both have to be secured from the threats of cybersecurity. The data has to be confidential and safe, and the people should have privacy. Apart from that, other reporting portals like the 1930 portal, the National Mission on Interdisciplinary Cyber Physical Systems, Cyber Crisis Management Plans, etc., they are important. So, Cyber Crisis Management Plan, Cyber Physical System Security, or the phygital security systems, all of these need to be put into place. For example, there is a platform called the Samanvaya platform, which provides analytical intelligence. The Samanvaya platform provides us analytical intelligence to various law enforcement authorities who are investigating cyber crimes. Apart from that, there is another portal called the Sahyog portal, which allows for interstate and interagency coordination for catching the cyber criminals. Basically, what is to be done is to ensure that people and data both are safe at the same time. So the safety of people and the safety of data are both to be taken together, hand in hand. Now we come to the next topic, that is the role of media and social networking sites in internal security, in creating challenges to internal security. Again, we have to look at it from the point of view of first how to define these and what are the PYQs that have been asked. Regarding media, there have been no direct PYQs that have been asked, because UPSC has focused more on social media and especially the social networking sites. So what traditionally media is one-way communication It's basically a medium of one-way communication from certain agencies to the general public and all the stakeholders of society. So media consists of one-way communication in this case. However, what is different is social media. Social media basically now is synonymous with social networking sites. Social media basically is just using of the media through the internet, wherein each user can interact with the media agencies. So when the users, they can interact directly with media agencies, provide them information, provide them with direct feedback, or just directly interact with them without the need of other traditional media like newspapers or televisions, then that is social media. A subset of this, or what largely the social media ecosystem comprises of, is nothing but users and those media agencies. When the users interact amongst themselves, so when U1 and U2, they interact amongst themselves, then this platform where this interaction takes place is the social networking sites. So UPSC in 2013 had already asked that what are these social networking sites? So basically, we have to understand the difference between the social media and the social networking sites. Now, when it comes to media, the basic factor that needs to be remembered is that it can be used in a positive way by the people, by the government, to spread peace, hope, knowledge, or it can be also misused negatively by such negative elements, organized criminals, terrorists, all the threats to internal security that you can think of, to spread fear, to spread despair, to spread misinformation, propaganda, and initiate violence through radicalization. So these are basically the positives and negatives into which we can break the role of media. We'll see this in our notes as well. Firstly, we can have a list of the positive roles of media. One is accountability and transparency. For example, the media coverage after post 26/11, which basically led to the threats of passing information to the terrorists, it forced a comprehensive overhaul of India's coastal security architecture. So basically, the large-scale coverage that the terrorist attacks got, it also led to a positive outcome that the coastal security architecture was revamped through which the attacks took place. Then counter-radicalization can take place. Basically, responsible media coverage can humanize the security force personnel, or basically spread the right information or the message of peace and hope and jointness and togetherness to counter the extremist radicalization propaganda. Then communication during crisis times. This media has been the most effective medium to spread information regarding various disasters, help in evacuation, creating safe zones, and providing emergency contacts in case of any disaster or internal security issue. So basically, media has positive as well as negative roles. The negative roles, as we saw, apart from the ones that we saw, were irresponsible live coverage. For example, during 26/11, the media transmitted key details of the attacks which were being watched by the handlers of terrorists in Pakistan and were being used to carry out more and more assassinations and killings, and just ensuring that the operation continues for as long as possible because they had an external point of view which the media was providing. So this led to media guidelines during the terror attacks by the News Broadcasters Association, which was the way ahead for this. Then sensationalizing and communal polarization is a very important issue that we can see today also, that media sensationalizes. For example, during Operation Sindoor, media was sensationalizing and giving a lot of fake news from whatever sources they were getting or from whatever basically stimulus they were getting, and that led to a ban on the use of sirens that they were constantly using from the broadcasting authorities of India, because that was leading to unnecessary fear and basic paranoia in the society. Why this is done? Because the news channels are TRP driven. Recently, there has been a ban for 1 or 2 months on the TRP of news channels. Basically, the television ratings that are disseminated, which define how many people are watching the news channel, those have been discontinued and banned temporarily because it was leading to sensationalization of media. Then fake news is amplified, example in the case of Operation Sindoor, the Galwan clash, and then inadvertently or unknowingly they become a propaganda platform. For example, during Burhan Wani's case in Kashmir, who was a terrorist who had picked up arms against India, but was through some media outlets, he was shown in a less negative light. Now, what are the threats of social media to internal security? Again, communal violence, terrorist propaganda, anti-national disinformation. All these threats are the common threats or the negative aspects of media to internal security. Now, let's talk about social media and social networking sites. When it comes to social networking sites or social media, basically, social networking sites are the most common method of spreading information in the country. Why they have become so popular? Their cause for popularity is multifold. Firstly, cheap data in India at rupees 9 per GB, one of the cheapest data, I think the cheapest data rates in the world. Then apart from that, 85% telecom density and penetration. Then also the prevalence of 4G and 5G almost saturated across the country. 70% of population being connected to the internet. 26 GB data per day per person is being consumed by India. So all this, along with the rise of short video formats as well as the prevalence of 4G and 5G technologies, is leading to greater use of social media and social networking sites. What is also happening, the latest trend now is we are moving on to satellite based internet. So satellite internet is now being allowed, 100% FDI has been allowed for satellite internet. Basically, the satellites will directly transmit internet to the devices without the need for intermediate infrastructure on land for that. And that will lead to the penetration even to rural areas or inaccessible areas through these satellites. Various reforms like the Telecom Act 2023, the Telecom Act, then space reforms for satellite communication, as well as various new initiatives like the Digital Bharat Nidhi and the National Broadband Mission 2.0. All these are leading to the greater penetration of social media and social networking sites in the country. So again, we will look at them. We've seen what they are. Now we'll look at what are their positives and what are their negatives. So the negatives remain the same as previously. Communal polarization, terrorist propaganda, anti-national disinformation, encrypted platform exploitation. So encrypted platforms like WhatsApp and Signal, they make interception practically impossible while these terror networks exploit them. Recently, the Telegram ban by the government under the IT rules before the NEET re-exam or the re-NEET exam is a clear example of how social networking sites were being accused of leaking papers and leaking the questions on social media through the various different channels. So even the first case of spreading of such fake news and doctored video was during the Muzaffarnagar riots, which had significantly amplified the riots because of social media. Now there are certain positives that need to be looked at. When it comes to social media, UPSC in its PYQs has asked certain set themes. What is the definition? What are the security implications or the threats? and what are the guidelines, how the measures can be taken place, because the threats or the misuse of social networking sites is a major component. So we have to look at threats, definition, misuse, and how it can be used effectively. So basically the negatives and positives need to be seen, and what are the guidelines or measures that can be taken need to be seen. So we've seen the threats. Now we look at the positives of social media. The positives is it can act as a great source of intelligence gathering. This is called SOCMINT, that is social media intelligence. It consists of the user generated data and the metadata. Metadata is the data about the user. So basically metadata and data both are together used, and this can give actionable intelligence insights and help provide information regarding various internal security threats. So this actionable intelligence is called now hard intelligence. This can be used to carry out various intelligence operations. Then it leads to easier citizen engagement. For example, Delhi police uses social media to issue real-time updates, or it issues various advisories through the social media, Twitter, etc. Then data mining, social media metadata helps agencies predict events like flash mobs and protest violence. Then evidence collection, social media acts as a great source of evidence for various crimes, the various conflicts that happen in the society. The social media profiles of criminals and the victims, they both provide evidences. Then public awareness, for example, WhatsApp chats are constantly used by the court. They are now legally permissive evidences in courts, and they are used for carrying out true justice. Then public awareness, for example, Mumbai police's campaigns on updating the society or creating awareness in society about the traffic rules, and cyber fraud awareness, etc. All these are the positives of social media. Now, again, we look at the differences between social media and social networking. Social media refers to online platforms which allow users to create and share content, while social networking sites social networking refers to building and maintaining these communities between the users. So user to user interaction is social networking, when the focus is on content creation here, and the social networking is based on relationship building and communication. Facebook and X are examples of social media, while the Facebook groups, the WhatsApp communities, they are examples of social networking, which occur on social networking sites, which itself are Facebook and Instagram, etc. They have both certain security implications. They can amplify content to disinformation, and these can create closed networks which can be used for radicalization and again creating extremism, and the vicious cycle of extremism will continue here through social media. Now, how it can be regulated is something that needs to be known and remembered. Yeah. So, regulation of social media, important topic. Firstly, the biggest regulatory challenge is again multiple points of entry and exit, the issues of data privacy, data protection, balancing it with freedom of speech, and the constitutional imperatives. So again, similar challenges as what we see in the whole cybersecurity domain here. The present regulatory framework starts with the constitutional articles like the Article 19(1)(a), which gives the freedom of speech and expression, and reasonable restrictions are imposed under Article 19 Clause 2. Then comes the IT Act 2000, which provides punishment for cyber crimes. Then the IT guidelines, which were published in 2021, which provided the fiduciary responsibility to these agencies like Facebook, Twitter, and mandated content takedowns and required grievance redressal. The 2023 amendment, which established PIB's fact-checking unit, and the Section 69A of IT Act, which empowers government to block digital content, can be used as fodder for your answers. Apart from that, the Press Council of India and the UAPA both have provisions applicable to investigating the actions of journalists as well as those who spread propaganda regarding terrorism on social media. So these are the actions and the options available to the government to carry out various measures against the people who are spreading propaganda on social media platforms and social networking sites. Next, apart from that, what are the challenges? Number one, privacy concerns. So we have to balance privacy with the rights and as well as the various security measures. So it's a classic ethical dilemma of privacy versus security. For example, the case of Cambridge Analytica, in which organization called Cambridge Analytica collected a lot of data in an unethical way from users during 2018. Apart from that, issues of freedom of expression, encryption issues where end-to-end encryption on WhatsApp makes tracing practically impossible of any illicit or illegal activities, then jurisdictional complications because platforms operate under, these are multinational companies, they operate under foreign corporate structures and enforcing Indian law is not easy. The Data Protection Act wants to ensure that there is domestic storage of data, but these companies, because they call themselves or they are legally foreign companies, they do not want to, they do not wish to store data within Indian borders. Then technological evolution, these platforms constantly change. New forms of communication and new features added to these platforms make their regulation very, very tough. Apart from that, issues like digital divide in India, wherein urban areas internet penetration is 2x of rural area. Rural area only 48% internet penetration is there. So this forms a major issue along with digital literacy issues and the liability of intermediaries which they do not want to take. There was a judgment in 2020 by Supreme Court, the Anuradha Bhasin judgment, which said that right to access to internet is a fundamental right, because that internet itself is not a fundamental right, but internet is a way to gain access to the other fundamental rights like Article 19, freedom of speech and expression, and other freedoms of the under Article 19. So these were some things that we needed to understand. Now, as a way forward, we can include that we need comprehensive media regulations. For example, mandatory registration of online news portals, which is under the IT rules. Currently, only large online portals are regulated. Then media guidelines during live terror attacks must be binding legally. Fact-checking obligations for news broadcasters should be there before amplifying social media content. A new trend that has appeared is that social media amplification. Why? Because traditional media is constantly using information and news from social media to spread it, and that leads to increased virality of the information which is spread through social media. Then there should be distinction between editorial platforms which have a higher responsibility and intermediaries which have a lower liability, and that needs legislative clarity. If anyone is just passing on information or reporting, then that is different from an editorial scrutiny or analysis of the issue and presenting views on the issue. So that has to be legally separated. Other way forwards can be AI can be used to track patterns of repeat offenders, and hateful keywords can be blocked. National social media policy needs to be formulated, balancing security with freedom of expression. Then there should be self-regulation by platforms by labeling fake news, blocking suspicious accounts, ensuring community standards are met, and then something called Mumbai Police's social media lab model can be imposed nationally, where they carry out various research activities and collaborate with various agencies and various they keep just a repository of best practices to be used for social media use. So social media labs can be used in that way. In terms of courts, there have to be certain courts that can be used. So here cyber security or cyberspace related court, that is cyberspace has become the fifth domain of warfare, as important as land, sea and space. This was given by Strategic Framework on Cyber Warfare. Then data is the new oil and protecting it is a sovereign imperative. This was in the preamble of DPDP Act. India must prepare for a scenario where cyber and kinetic warfare are inseparable. That is what the CDS said. The Prime Minister said that I dream of a digital India where the digital security or the cyber security is an integral part of internal security. So this can be used as a conclusion in any of the questions on cyber security, social media, and social networking sites. So recent developments like Operation Sindoor, 1.5 million simultaneous DDoS attacks. Then the ETI framework was introduced by this Chief of Defence Staff, that is the Evaluating Trustworthy Artificial Intelligence Framework for Responsible Governance and Management of AI Systems. The DPDP Act operationalization took place. The rules were recently came into existence. Then cryptocurrencies, virtual digital assets, and non-fungible tokens were formally brought under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act that closed a major regulatory gap in the cyber security nexus and with the money laundering bodies. Then the Indian Cyber Crime Coordination Center was formally included under Section 66 of the PMLA, enabling the cybercrime linked money laundering information sharing between the cyber security and financial intelligence agencies. Then the Maharashtra ATS, it burst the ISIS module in Pune, it carried out multiple arrests by and it highlighted the role of use of cyber forensics in tracking digital radicalization and the threats caused by it. So these are the latest initiatives and development in this whole domain. We can see those data points, how many internet users in India is there, more than 820 million, 55% are there in rural communities. There was the AIMS ransomware attack, DPDP Act penalty, 250 crore maximum penalty has been imposed by the Data Protection Board, and something called the Budapest Convention, which India has declined to sign. This is the binding cybercrime TT because India is concerned over the sovereignty issues regarding the data security and sovereignty of data. That is, our data should be controlled by the state and not in the hands of external agencies or external states. These are some common issues and common way forward that can be used for any of your answers. This has high repeat value and it can be used in across all these topics. Amongst them, one very important thing is for cyber security strategy or policy, there should be a unified cyber command structure designating a single national cyber coordinator and a balanced encryption policy. That is where there is a balance between encryption and privacy as well as the security of the country, because that is somewhat always at conflict. Next, we move on to the other topic, that is money laundering and organized crime and the nexus between organized crime and terrorism. So these two topics again are highly important. They need to be studied and they need to be understood from the point of view of the PYQs first. So we move on to the next topic now, that is money laundering and its prevention. Again, we have to look at the dimensions of what the PYQs ask us from time to time. So firstly, what is asked is what is the definition of money laundering? The definition has been asked. What are the measures the government can take or has taken? The effectiveness of those said measures against money laundering. Apart from that, something that is asked commonly is significance or the threats posed by money laundering. So any of the threats multidimensionally, you need to address them. Then the nexus or the linkages of money laundering with drug trafficking, organized crime, etc. Those are asked. Apart from that, what is asked is the technology, the use of technology in money laundering. What are the new trends? A subset of this whole topic of money laundering is black money or parallel economy. So this is also another topic that is constantly asked regarding what is the definition of black money or what is the definition of parallel economy, then what are the causes of this problem of black money and what are the effects of this black money or parallel economy. So we see a few keywords that we need to learn and we need to define so that we can answer any question on any question that is asked within this topic. So firstly, let's just see what is money laundering. Before that, let us first also understand what is basically black money. So black money is any money on which tax is evaded, and it comes from illicit sources. So if the source, the tax is evaded on any money, then this is black money. This comes from illicit sources, or it can also come from legitimate sources on which tax is not paid. For example, a shopkeeper or a large corporation, if it is earning money by selling fast food, but it is not paying its own tax, what is due, then that constitutes what is black money. What is money laundering? Legally, the definition it is the process of converting the proceeds of crime or this money on which tax is not paid, that is dirty money, into clean money or legitimate funds from legitimate sources. So dirty money, that is money from illegitimate sources or from those activities which are illegal, that constitutes that the conversion of this or the cleaning of this money constitutes the process of money laundering. This is the financial oxygen. You can use this keyword, that it is the financial oxygen that sustains organized crime. So money laundering is nothing but the process of converting the dirty money that is from proceeds of crime or various nefarious activities into the clean money. According to India's, basically the legal law that regulates money laundering in India, that is the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. This has also given a definition. The background behind is that before 2002, we had various acts that targeted the problem of black money. The Benami Property Transaction Act, the Sarfesi Act, all these, the MRTP Act. A lot of these acts had components which addressed this problem of money laundering, but there was no single comprehensive law. But due to the global conventions that we had to follow, we had to enact this law called the PMLA. It defines money laundering as the process connected with converting the proceeds of crime and projecting it as untainted property. So, process of converting proceeds of crime into untainted property. This is what is money laundering, and this is defined by the Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2002. At a global scale, if we have to look at the data, so 2 to 5% of GDP is what is laundered across the world annually. Apart from that, the UN estimates India's criminal proceeds to be 4 to 6% of GDP. So India is 4 to 6%, and at the world level 2 to 5% of GDP is part of money laundering. The new trend is that $14 billion were used through cryptocurrency to be money laundered. So cryptocurrency became a medium of laundering this money recently. These are some key data that you can use. Now, what we have to look at is what are the basic threats which are caused by money laundering. Before that, let us first also understand how the money laundering process works, because these terms can be asked. They have not been asked yet, but it can be asked, and it also helps show a theoretical framework background for your subject. So if you're able to inculcate this in any of your answer, it will help enhance the quality of the answer. So money laundering takes place in 3 steps. You probably must have heard of it: placement, layering, and then integration. These words are what they sound like. Placement is nothing but introducing the dirty cash into the financial system. So dirty cash here is included into the financial system. This is done either through formal channels or informal channels. Formal channels refers to channels like smurfing, that is breaking off a large deposit into small deposits and depositing in formal banking network. So basically a large amount is broken down into very small amounts so as to avoid raising suspicion. This process is called smurfing. SMURFING, smurfing. Apart from that, certain informal channels may also be used, such as hawala transaction, wire transfers, etc. So hawala, wire, all these are used for transferring or placing the money in the financial system. What is hawala transaction? Basically, it is a system where in country 1, A transfers a certain amount to B, who is the hawaldar or hawaladar. He is basically the agent, he or she, who is helping carry out this transaction. Then B confirms this transaction to C, who is the other part of the hawaladar system or the hawala system. They confirm it based on trust. So hawala system is based on just trust that yes, a certain payment has been made to me. So now this C person will send D the amount that was paid to him by taking a brokerage in between, and then that will be transferred to D. And A now directly doesn't have to send money to D to carry out whatever activities they wanted to, and now this money is almost untrackable. Later on, this transaction is settled between C and B by various means, such as the use of technology. It can be done through various mediums, and it can be done through various different methods. These methods can be something like using of cryptocurrency, trade misinvoicing. So basically, trade misinvoicing can be done where fake bills or receipts can be made regarding trade, cryptocurrency can be used, and various physical goods can be transferred from one place to another in lieu of the money. So this is the basic first technique of placement. Now layering involves performing multiple financial transactions and layering these legitimate financial transactions with these illegitimate or the dirty money, which has been now integrated and placed into the financial system, and layering it with the legitimate transactions so that the authorities are not easily able to track it. So basically, the money trail is obscured through complex transactions, transfers, currency changes, etc. So currencies change, various transfers are done along with bundling it with the or layering it with the legitimate funds and legitimate transactions. Finally, the integration takes place where the clean money is now reintroduced into the legitimate economy. Now that the money has been layered, it is introduced into legitimate economy. For example, the Sahara group, they used this laundered money to buy 30 to fund, and they used it to fund the purchase of luxury hotels outside the country. So they used shell companies, basically companies which do not have any physical presence and are not conducting any legitimate business, and they use them to buy hotels, luxury hotels and resorts in offshore areas or away from the country. So this was how the proceeds of the dirty money was laundered finally and converted into real estate property. This is the basic framework or the basic process of money laundering. Now we should look at what are the threats that are posed by this money laundering, or the significance or the threats that can be posed because of money laundering. Number one is the social fabric gets disturbed or destroyed. Why? Because the funds that are used to carry out crime, which disturbs the social fabric, are now legitimized, and then they help re-strengthen the activities of the criminals. Apart from that, economic destabilization of the country takes place. Why? Because the legitimate funds are getting pumped out of the economy, of the formal economy, and then getting layered into the informal or the black or the parallel economy run by black money. So basically, economic destabilization and destabilization of financial systems is now done. What happens is this makes the interest rates and the exchange rates volatile, and that ultimately puts pressure on the macroeconomic fundamentals of any country, and it also promotes the black economy, black money economy, or the parallel economy, where there is a loss of tax revenue to the state, thereby reducing the administrative or the governance capacity. So ultimately, this will again lead to the vicious cycle of extremism, which we had learned in the previous class. Democracy suffers, fair competition in the economy suffers, and other things such as FDI, foreign investment, policy distortions, they all take place. So policy distortion because the government or the formal economy cannot keep track of this economy. So the policy decisions are made based on formal economy, and those are not a reflection of what is the total amount of money being circulated in reality. Apart from that, the foreign investment quotient also goes down. Why? Because the prevalence of laundered money reflects the strengthening or presence of organized crime or organized criminals, which the foreign investors will try to avoid. So basically, these are the various threats and issues that are posed by money laundering. Now, one other thing that is common to both money laundering and black money needs to be understood is what is the cause. So what was asked, what are the causes of black money and the problem of parallel economy? Similar question can be asked that what are the causes of this problem of money laundering? So the causes, again, they are somewhat legitimate as well. There is a higher tax burden wherever such parallel economy exists, and it is usually existing in developing countries who have a need to collect greater tax from the people for their developmental needs. Then the burden of compliances, multiple compliances that have to be followed in the formal economy, promote the prevalence of this parallel economy. Then the rate of real estate is a big problem. Real estate is a big medium for the channelization of this black economy or parallel economy funds. But the problem here is that the rates, the circle rates in real estates are much lesser than the market rates. So there is a rate mismatch here in case of real estate. This rate mismatch is because of a certain few causes, such as poor land records. Apart from that, there is non-regular review of circle rates. Circle rates are the rates of property which are established by the government, which are the basic floor rates. Then it also is because of the various issues such as the lack of a formal economy in the country and various other reasons. So there is a mismatch between the circle rate and the market rate, causing this problem in the real estate sector, and then the real estate sector becomes a key magnet for these black money funds or this parallel economy funds. Now, what needs to be remembered is what is the basic way forward in this case. So to ensure that what the problem of real estate can be solved here, it is needed that there is modernization of land records. So land records need to be modernized. Aadhaar linkage with land records is needed, something like Bhu Aadhaar or the ULIN, Universal Land Identification Number. These are various initiatives to ensure that the circle rate and market rate are close by, and there should be biannual review of the circle rates along with microzonation. So microzonation would ensure that those areas which are more in demand or which should have a higher market price are given the due circle rate. Then apart from this is the cause of higher inequalities in the country, the prevalence of an informal economy. For example, India itself has more than a 85 to 90% informal economy, and the lack of public trust in the governance. So the lack of public trust and the presence of criminals and organized crime networks, they all are the causes behind the black money or the parallel economy issue. Then the effects. What are the effects of this? The effects are again similar to the negative threats that are because of this. So we'll just talk about what are the negatives as we have done for the other sectors. For example, it leads to increasing organized crime, it leads to increasing illegal activities, tax evasion, loss of tax revenue, loss of security, and more conflicts in the society, and so on and so forth. So parallel economy is created and public trust is now reduced. It also leads to informalization of credit, and that is where digital lending apps and digital loan apps come in the picture. So basically the social fabric, as in the case of money laundering, is sort of hurt. What are the measures that can be taken to counter the problem of black money? Again, we'll break it down. Firstly, the legislative measures. There is the Black Money Act of 2015, the Benami Property Transaction Act of 1988, amended in 2016. Apart from that, various other provisions like the presence of the passing of the Fugitive Economic Offenders Act in 2018. And then this followed by various provisions of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita as well as provisions of Finance Act 2026, which amended the Black Money Act, few provisions of it, excluding minors and excluding genuine errors, the bona fide errors, from the purview of getting prosecuted under the Black Money Act. Apart from that, there are some systematic changes that need to be done. For example, formalization of economy, that has been done through the passage of GST Act and the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. Then apart from that, demonetization was done, which involved the returning of almost 86% of all currency. And apart from that, certain provisions like the JAM Trinity was established, that is Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile. The bank accounts were linked with mobile numbers and Aadhaar numbers to ensure that all account holders are legitimate. Now, if we have to assess the effectiveness of these measures, that was asked. So effectiveness of these measures can be evaluated one by one. For example, regarding demonetization, 99% of currency, it actually came back. Whatever was collected from the public, so it was back in circulation. However, the positive was that it led to increased digitalization of the economy, and prevalence of and the dominance of UPI that we see today was linked ultimately with this event. Then regarding GST, fake invoicing has led to loss of great revenue to the Board of Indirect Taxes and the government. However, it has also led to record increase in indirect tax collections and formalization of the economy, because more and more people are registered under GST. Regarding the Black Money Act, it has led to improvements in the basic criminal provisions and consolidated it. So it has led to certain improvements. However, there are legal loopholes in its implementation and technological issues. which hamper the catching of such black money and parallel economy. What can be certain way forwards here? The way forwards can be firstly a reduction in the direct tax rates for the corporates as well as individuals, so that they are not afraid of becoming a part of the formal economy. Then the real estate transactions, they need to be overhauled like we talked about, so that the circle rate is near the market rate. Why? Because real estate is a major channel of the money laundering and black money economy or the parallel economy. For that, we need formalization and digitalization of land records. Again, periodic review twice in a year of the circle rates, etc. And the presence of Bhu Aadhaar and universal land identification number. Thirdly, the political reforms are needed. So if political reforms are done, legal reforms, enhancing measures of transparency and enhancing the various measures of these acts is done, then that will be a better way forward. State capacity has to be enhanced, and that can be done by building trust within the public, among the public, as well as initiatives like e-rupee, which will help bolster the digitalization of the rupee and the prevalence of formal economy. Stamp duty on real estate transactions also needs to be reduced. So these are some common way forwards which can be used to answer these questions, along with some legal provisions of and international conventions that can be utilized to the international conventions, international cooperation. This is another way forward. So basically, global things like the global minimum tax, the grey list and black list of Financial Action Task Force, all the economic intelligence related bodies of the country, they can be utilized like FIUIND, like the Enforcement Directorate. All these need to be strengthened. Now, ED is the main body which deals with the problem of money laundering, and it needs to be studied that what are the new changes in the law regarding Enforcement Directorate. So again, we've seen now the definition of money laundering, we've seen the data, we've seen the 3 stages, we've understood all of this. The key techniques are also written, some of them, like the Hawala system, something called trade-based money laundering. Basically, it is disguised through manipulated trade, over and under invoicing. We talked about this, shell companies, cryptocurrencies, structuring and smurfing, we all mentioned all of this. Then the modern techniques is the use of cryptocurrency, pseudo-anonymous digital assets. They are misused with mixers and tumblers and chain hopping techniques to basically break this link between source and destination. So 14 billion transactions, they occurred globally in 2021. Then the proceeds from cyber crime, they are also used for money laundering, and they are laundered. Basically, for that, the I4C was included under PMLA in 2025. Illegal wildlife trade, where the proceeds are laundered through front companies like private zoos, farms, etc. That is also done. Insurance and securities, criminals buy insurance policies and that with illicit funds and file fraudulent claims along with other initiatives. What is India's legal framework? Firstly is the PMLA Act, which empowers the enforcement directorate, making it a statutory body which can attach and confiscate crime proceeds. Banks must perform KYC under this act and report via these state and central reports to the authorities. There should be special courts for expedited trials which exist. The ED code, the PMLA courts are there, and the beneficial ownership threshold has been tightened from 25% to 10% for any company. It covers basically all these provisions: investigation, prosecution, confiscation of property, and various other such actions. Then the Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999, which channels all foreign currency transactions through regulated pathways, and it flags suspicious flows in the cross-border economy. Then the Black Money Act, which says that there will be a 30% flat tax, up to 90% penalty plus 7 years imprisonment on hidden foreign assets, and it forces financial transparency. So it was the first problem which legally and directly addressed the problem of black money. It was the first act. Then the Benami Transaction Act, which criminalizes property held through proxy or benamidar, and total confiscation. There is confiscation and 7 years jail for this. and it is for targeting the money laundered through property. Then the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act for the NGOs, that targets money that is illegally sent to NGOs or funds which are laundered through NGOs to carry out nefarious activities and also convert the dirty money into a clean money. Then recent amendments have been done in the PMLA Act which need to be looked at. For example, the definition of proceeds of crime has been now expanded. It encompasses not only from scheduled offences but also from property from related criminal activities. So property not just from scheduled offences but also from other related offences will be part of the proceeds of crime. So thereby enhancing its circle of influence or whatever its circle of enforcement. Then individuals can be charged with money laundering if directly or indirectly involved, not just organizations. So at an individual level, PMLA now can be applied, and the scope has been expanded to include concealment, possession, acquisition, use, and claiming it as untainted property. So basically the scope of the act has been expanded a lot. Now there was the twin bail test in 2022 where a Supreme Court upheld this judgment in the Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary judgment. Expanded powers of under PMLA of the Enforcement Directorate were upheld. The court said that the court must believe the accused is not guilty and unlikely to reoffend before granting bail. Why? Because money laundering is considered to be a continuous crime. It is treated as a continuing crime, enabling retrospective application. So because there is a high likelihood of the person going out and then continuing in the activity, this was done. And India's commitment to FATF standards, that is the Financial Action Task Force, the international body, that was the basic grounding of this judgment. There are certain concerns with PMLA. Firstly, there is the presumption of innocence that is violated because the person who is accused under this law is presumed to be guilty. So it presumes guilt until proven otherwise, contrary to the Anglo-Saxon principle. FATF itself recognizes this as a legal principle. So this is legally recognized. Then the non-disclosure of enforcement case information report. This is not disclosed and ED is not mandated to disclose this while arresting it, and challenges the right to be informed of such charges, which is under Article 20 and 21. Then the scope creep issue, that is initially drug money is targeted, but now it is leading to targeting of certain even unrelated offences like copyright violations, straying away from the original purpose. Then stringent bail conditions under Section 45, there's a near impossible bail standard, and there is friction amongst the federal bodies because ED operates without state consent and conflicts with India's federal structure because police itself is a stateless subject. Now, India's institutional framework first involves institutions like FIU IND, which collects and analyzes currency transaction reports and suspicious transaction reports and shares the intelligence with law enforcement agencies. Then ED, which investigates and prosecutes under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act cases. 775 investigations, but only 34 convictions in 2024. 30,000 crore rupees were attached as property. Then the JAM Trinity, that is the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and Mobile for formalization of economy. 440 million accounts have been formalized. Now the problem, the debate always exists, is are ED's great powers or the increasing scope of powers within the ambit of law, and is it reasonable? So there are two arguments. One is for the expansion of ED powers because money laundered is actually used in organized crime, terrorism and all these activities, and it needs a powerful investigating authority, while here the concentration of power without checks and balances can lead to some negative impacts on democracy and fundamental rights. Apart from that, what happens is that the Supreme Court, because it held the powers of the Enforcement Directorate constitutionally valid, but there is a low conviction rate. Only 4.6% is the conviction rate, and massive property is attached, but conviction is not really a big or final objective which is achieved. The FATF compliance requires a robust anti-money laundering enforcement. That is why the powers should be there, but presumption of guilt in bail conditions, it violates fundamental rights. And the terror financing, again, that requires preemptive financial action, but this is selectively used sometimes with fears of bias and politics which is underlying it. So ED's expanded powers are constitutionally valid but institutionally problematic. Thus, the solution is not restricting their power but strengthening prosecutorial capacity, judicial oversight, and procedural safeguards so that it remains a powerful tool. Other way forwards include center-state coordination amongst the activities of ED. Number two, it involves the increasing awareness of the people regarding the provisions of the Act, convergence and collaborations of the various financial intelligence bodies to undertake various actions, sharing of intelligence, etc., and then increasing the budget of the organization. Now, regarding the international conventions, what are established? One is the Financial Action Task Force. Apart from that, there are certain other initiatives like the Vienna Convention against non-drug psychotropic substances. It covers various provisions of money laundering. Apart from that, there is the Strasbourg Convention. This is by the Council of Europe. It directly addresses money laundering. This is by UN. Then, thirdly, another international body or convention that helps it, or the basically a body which works for this, is the Basel Committee, which has given principles on money laundering. And finally, most important, is the Financial Action Task Force, which was established by G7 in 1989, and it has issued 40 recommendations as the gold standard of anti-money laundering. It has certain lists, for example, the grey list, the black list, wherein Pakistan was grey listed from 2018 to 2022, and it cost them $38 billion. India requested Pakistan to be relisted in this list post Pahalgam attack. Then India is in the highest compliance category with this Financial Action Task Force recommendations alongside UK, Italy, and France. Its only concerns about India is that there is a low conviction rate and there are backlogs in the court regarding the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So these are the other convention. The Palermo Convention, it extends money laundering to all serious crimes. It's under the Comprehensive Organized Crime Group framework. Then UN Convention Against Corruption, Egmont Group, and Wolfsburg Anti-Money Laundering Principles. These are ongoing, negotiated across the world. Now we move on to the next topic, that is the nexus between organized crime and terrorism. Firstly, let us define what both of these are and then move on. So, one, we need to define organized crime, then we need to define terrorism, and then understand the nexus or the relationship between them. In terms of what is asked from this topic, the nexus between organized crime and terrorism, there are no direct questions as such which are asked, but what is mostly asked is the questions regarding the causes between the nexus, the effects between the nexus. No definitions are directly asked, but you should know them. Then what are the causes of cross-border terrorism, the causes of separatism, radicalization. So a lot of causes are asked. The causes of religious extremism. So causes forms an important heading under which you have to study all the topics here. Then apart from that, the measures that are taken against this nexus or against organized crime or against terrorism, how they manifest. So causes, effects, how they manifest, what are the measures taken against it. Then apart from that, what was asked is specialized issues like the issue of ISIS, how it radicalizes, then the nature of terrorism, how it is changing, how it is becoming a competitive industry. So the nature of organized crime or terrorism, because that terrorism is becoming a competitive industry. That is because there is a great economy called the violence economy, and terrorism is a great part of it, and it wants to be good at it, and it wants a greater share of it. So there is greater competition amongst the various terror groups. They almost act like corporates, having their own branding, having their own propaganda machinery, having their own set of employees, having their own set of ways of working which are quite organized. So it is becoming a competitive industry with multiple groups trying to gain a bigger share of the violence economy. Apart from that, Something else that can be asked is the funding sources of terrorism. That was asked a few years back. And no money for terror finance. This was a conference that was held. So what happened in that conference was asked. So these things are the basic sources of the questions. Regarding definitions, organized crime can be defined as a group of 3 or more people basically operating with the intent to commit serious crimes. So 3 or more people operating with intent to commit serious crimes, not just petty crimes, and in a systematic way they are organized. And these serious crimes are those crimes whose imprisonment is for more than 4 years. So that is what a serious crime is under the definition of organized crime. They basically are done in a planned way, and there is no single accepted definition of this organized crime. So basically we have to understand what organized crime is in terms of the number of people that it involves and the kind of planning or the kind of intent that the organized criminals show. So this is what is organized crime. Now let's look at the PDF, what it says. Firstly, we'll talk about the nexus between organized crime and terrorism. So basically, the various dimensions are terror financing through the criminal enterprises. Basically, organized criminals consist of drug traffickers, human trafficking cartels. Apart from that, there are certain smugglers, then pornography rackets, illegal arms traders, even certain NGOs, cyber criminals, cybercrime groups, certain non-state actors. All of these, they act as organized crime groups and they operate in different domains. Sometimes they smuggle wildlife, they smuggle arms, they smuggle ammunition, they smuggle technology. So all these people who do crime with the intent and doing serious crimes in a group, these are organized crime groups. So what is the nexus? It is firstly terror financing through criminal enterprises. For example, Lashkar-e-Toiba funnels illicit money through businesses, NGOs and Hawala. Narco-terrorism, that is buying drugs with the money, buying weapons with the money using drugs, and terrorism protects the trafficking routes while the drug traffickers, they finance the terrorism. For example, in Punjab, Pakistan-linked cartels traffic heroin funding Khalistani groups, and in Jammu and Kashmir, 15% militant group finances are accounted from narcotics. Then comes illegal arms trade, where illicit weapons flow through same networks such as narcotics. For example, Ulfa in Assam and Lashkar-e-Toiba, they directly depend on illegal arms imports. And then the human trafficking, which is used as terror tools, where ISIS use trafficking to recruit the child soldiers. And these are criminalized insurgencies where profit and ideology are inseparable. So again, we look at the major forms of organized crime such as drug trafficking. Why? Because India sits between the Golden Triangle and the Golden Crescent. Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, and Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, which are the two largest narcotics production zones and directly finances the terrorism. Same for arms smuggling, human trafficking, etc., which is actually especially done in Kerala, West Bengal, Assam, etc. Then fake Indian currency note networks, which was at the peak in 2016 around the time of demonetization, where 250 fake notes per 10 lakh were in circulation. The seizures, they rose from 28 crores to 98 crore in 2020. Bangladesh, Myanmar and Nepal are the biggest sources of this fake currency notes, which destabilizes the economy and funds the terror activities. Then cybercrime, India is the second most attacked nation in Asia Pacific and the overall second most country where financial frauds occur. Proceeds are laundered through these various jurisdiction and various channels operated by the organized crime groups. Now, if we compare what is terrorism, terrorism is basically activities which strike fear in the minds of people, which are done with the objective, which are political in nature. So, spreading violence to achieve a political objective is basically the definition of terrorism. Terrorism definition is always in news, whether to define terrorism or not. This is one of the biggest reasons that India is reluctant to sign India has proposed the UN Convention on Terrorism, Countering Terrorism. Terrorism has been defined at a few places, but it needs to have a very comprehensive definition. So for terrorism definition in India, the primary legal framework is BNS, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, section 113, and section 15 of the UAPA, section 113 of BNS and section 15 of UAPA. These two help define what is terrorism. So what the BNS says, it basically brings the definition of terror activity directly into primary criminal code of India, and it allows for a clear definition of terrorism. So we'll see what the definition is. You can write it down. The BNS categorizes a terrorist act as any action committed with the intention to threaten the unity, integrity, sovereignty, and the economic security of India, or to strike terror in public or any section of public, to intend to basically to disturb the public order or compel the government or the state or of any foreign government to perform or abstain from performing any act. It can involve the use of explosive, firearms, lethal weapons, and all kinds of weapons likely to cause death, serious bodily injury, or massive property damage. Prior to this terrorism was primarily handled by special preventive laws like UAPA only, but now this definition has been codified under the BNS now. India's stand on the UN Convention on Counter-Terrorism is also needed to be studied. So what is this? There is this convention proposed in the United Nations, that is the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. It is a landmark treaty that India had originally proposed in 1996, and despite decades of active push by India, there is a deadlock over the definition of terrorism. So India wants a universal, single, legally binding definition of terrorism, and it wanted to eliminate the concept of good versus bad terrorists. But because various national liberation movements, for example, from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation States, etc., they might be in conflict with this terrorism treaty of the UN, that is the Convention on Terrorism, which was proposed by India initially, called the CCIT, that is the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. It is yet to be formalized. So this is the legal background behind terrorism. Now let's see what the difference between terrorism and organized crime is. Firstly, the motivation in terrorism is ideological or political, overthrowing the state, while organized crime has no directly political motivation, where it wants only the proceeding of economic benefits should be furthered of the organized criminal groups. Apart from that, the visibility is high in terror groups. It claims responsibility, while organized criminals, they want low visibility. In terms of relationship with state, this is a confrontational relationship, while here there might be collusion and infiltration of the state by the organized criminals through bribery and corruption. In terms of methods, there is high profile violence here, while this involves low profile crime, including trafficking, extortion, etc. In case of similarities, both recruit from marginalized communities and both use advanced technologies, secrecy, and violence. There is a case study given on the D Company case and the Mumbai blast of 1993, which is about the nexus on organized crime and terrorism. You can read this. Then India's initiatives against organized crime need to be studied here. NDPS Act against the narcotic, it is the basic act against narcotic and drug substances, which allows for confiscation, arrest, and the prosecution, and India is signatory to all the three UN drug conventions. Apart from that, The UAPA Act, which has been amended in 2019, where for fake Indian currency notes were the network was classified as a terrorist act. Then the Makoka, which is effective against syndicates in Maharashtra and Delhi, Maharashtra Control of Crime Act. This is another major act. Then Operation Dhwast, which NIA performed and busted a major terrorist gangster and drug trafficking nexus. And there is a critical gap where there is no single organized crime law like the US, where it has a RICO Act, which targets the organized criminals. So we don't have a single such act. Now, recent initiatives need to be understood. For example, in the case of Operation Sindoor, it needs to be understood what was done. So we knew that there were precision strikes, and we shifted our stance on terror from strategic restraint to active deterrence. Then the Pahalgam attack, and FATF was pressurized to relist Pakistan. We formally requested Pakistan relisting and announced 5 non-military punitive measures, including the Indus Water Treaty suspension or abeyance. Then there is a FATF Private Sector Collaboration Forum, which was first held in India as a recognition of India's anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism leadership, and its regular follow-up status at FATF. Then FinNet 2.0 was launched, that is FIUIN's real-time suspicious transaction report and cross-border alert processing system. Then I4C was kept under the MLA, that is the body under Ministry of Home Affairs, for coordination of against cybercrime criminals and cybercrime. Then there was the 4th No Money for Terror conference in Munich 2025. This was asked in 2022 that what were the decisions here. In the 4th one, it focused on digital channels, private public partnership frameworks, and travel rules for virtual assets. India played a key role in shaping the final outcomes, and virtual digital assets have been now included under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act here. So these are the various new initiatives or new actions taken to counter this organized crime and terrorism nexus. The nexus has various dimensions, and each dimension has the similar issues and way forwards which we can use. For example, for low conviction, the issue of abysmally low, that is 4% conviction rate. We need to build prosecutorial capacity under PMLA by creating dedicated special PMLA court with trained prosecutors and set measurable conviction rate targets. Invest in forensic accounting training for ED officers and ensure attachment translate into successful prosecutions. So forensic accounting needs to be the people need to be the enforcement directorate officers need to be trained in. Then there's the issue of regulation of virtual digital assets, and there is no organized crime law, so we need a national organized crime law. Then we need to strengthen the enforcement of virtual digital assets like we did through PMLA inclusion, and then we have to reform ED's accountability issues by mandatory disclosure of the ECIR at the time of arrest to comply with Article 21, and enhance trade-based money laundering detection capacity so that trade is not used for layering or placement of funds within the legitimate financial system. So this was the whole issue that is needed to be studied in conjunction with each other. Organized crime and terrorism both form an integral part of the nexus and directly linked with money laundering as well. Now again, internal security challenges in border areas, the next topic. The set of questions that are asked are again quite static themes. Firstly, what is asked is regarding different various issues which exist in border areas. For example, the refugee or the illegal immigrant issues. A question was asked on the Bhutanese refugee problem in India. Then question was also asked on the issue of infiltration in eastern India. Then the factors which promote illegal immigration, eastern India illegal immigration. Then other issues such as the sea piracy and the maritime security issues. So for border areas, maritime security has been asked. The issue of piracy was asked a few years back, where IMO had changed the high risk priority areas from the 65-degree east longitude to 78-degree east longitude, which is quite near, which is almost coinciding with India's coastline, thereby including India in the high piracy risk areas. Apart from that, issues on airspace and air borders had already been asked in 2016. Then other issues regarding the various border problems, such as the developmental issues in border areas, the favorable perception of locals, and then border to border issues. For example, the issue with the Pak border, with the China border, with the Myanmar border, with the Bangladesh border. All these border to border issues with the Nepal border, all these also are asked from time to time. So again, we need to look at the whole topic from a very macro perspective. Firstly, I'm sure you all know how much is India's land borders length. The longest land border is India and Bangladesh. There is the concept of one border, one force, which is being implemented where there is a single security force to guard a single border. For example, BSF guards Indo-Bangladesh border. Indo-Pakistan border is also guarded by BSF and Indian Army at LOC. Then ITBP for the Indo-China border. Assam Rifles for the Myanmar border. Sashastra Seema Bal for Nepal border and the Bhutan border. And the Coast Guard and Marine Police and Navy for the coastline, which is of 11,000 kilometers now. So all these are the various border areas and border forces that guard the borders of the country. The basic responsibility of internal security lies in the hands of Ministry of Home Affairs, which is assisted by the army and the paramilitary forces. So this is a summary of all the bilateral border challenges so that you can make a map and represent this area in the map as a measure or as the issues if the issues are asked regarding the bilateral border challenges. For example, Indo-Pakistan border has the issue of terrorist infiltration, drugs, fake currency. For Indo-China, this is an open border. This is a border where fencing is not possible. Terrain is quite steep. Smuggling is done and used by Pakistan also for indirectly for terrorist infiltration. Then Indo-Myanmar border, the issue of mandate of Assam Rifles, where the operational control is under Indian Army or the Ministry of Defense, while the administrative control of Assam Rifles is under the Ministry of Home Affairs, which creates problems. Then free movement regime of 16 kilometers, which was abolished a few years back. Then drug smuggling problem from the Golden Triangle. Regarding Bangladesh, again, illegal migration, porous border, smuggling, refugees, they are the problem. And while the rest of the Indian-Nepal border is by unsettled border, multiplicity of forces, CPC, and dam construction in the higher riparian states. So these are some common problems. Now this is a whole summary of India's border dispute with its neighbors. It needs to be remembered. You need to go through it from your material so that none of the issues are missed by you, because they can be directly asked. A specific issue might directly be asked regarding the border security, as has been asked in the previous years. So every state, whatever the border challenges are, from Leh, Ladakh, Jammu Kashmir, to Nepal border, to the Bhutan border, to Myanmar, are given in this infographic, to the even the Gujarat border and the basically the Himachal borders. Now, if we look at from a border to border perspective, we must have a knowledge of what the LOC is, what the LAC is, and that is given in the material. You can read it from here. It is quite self-explanatory. You have to make maps like these. What is the international border? What is the line of control? Basically, international border is the settled border, while the line of control is in Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, which is not settled. And as it is not settled, so it is more of a ceasefire line under the Shimla Agreement of 1971, where certain ceasefire violations are common from time to time. So there are various security threats in the Pakistan border, like infiltration by terrorists, transboundary crime networks, organized crime, security measures at the border outposts, etc. So these need to be remembered. For border management, the main program, the flagship program is Comprehensive CIBMS. That is the border management system that has been formulated by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Basically, this refers to the modernization of all the land borders of the country. It refers to the comprehensive integrated border management systems, where a network of sensors, etc., will be used and is being used now to monitor the borders rather than just erecting fences. So, smart fencing has been launched recently on the Indo-Bangladesh border. It was inaugurated quite recently, it was in news. Then Indo-China border, the line of actual control, and there are three sectors to the Indo-China border: the western sector, the middle sector, and the eastern sector. They all need to be understood. Eastern sector is the Arunachal border, then the western sector is the Jammu and Kashmir and Himachal border, and the Uttarakhand border is the middle sector. So the least controversial is the middle sector, where there is hardly any dispute, but there is the dispute in Aksai Chin area and the dispute in Arunachal Pradesh, where Arunachal Pradesh is fully claimed by China, and India, Aksai Chin being an integral part of India, is occupied by China. So all these are the various border types of the Indo-China border. The LAC is not fully demarcated. It is divided into these three sections. LAC is the line of actual control which India has with China, because the border is not well settled. Being in the higher Himalayan reaches, it is not easy to pinpoint the exact border. So it is a line of actual control. The absence of a mutually agreed LAC is the central source of tension. There was an agreement with China on the LAC issue. There was a conflict in 2020, if you remember, regarding the Indo-China in Pangong Tso and Depsang Plains and Galwan Valley. This ultimately led to a standoff at the border and there was high escalation. But now, after the 2024 LAC agreement, there is going to be disengagement and resumption of patrolling, and then basically the de-escalation was done firstly, followed by finally disengagement. So disengagement and then de-escalation to de-induction is the process here. Firstly, there will be disengagement between the troops, the standoff will be reduced, then there will be de-engagement, such conflictionary engagement will be reduced, and finally they will be de-inducted from the LAC, all the troops that were deployed post 2020. So India has strategically now responded with the Vibrant Village program to counter China's Zhaokang model. Basically, Zhaokang is a village which was established, and villages are established under this model, which have great facilities and they promote the settlement of the Tibetans or the people living near the borders into these villages. So Vibrant Village program was promoted by India, which gave the first village name to the last villages that were near the borders, and to promote infrastructure development and tourism to these areas. There was expansion in the ITBP's battalions and high altitude airfields were commissioned. And China does constantly map fair. We've read about this, that it released standardized names for 27 locations in Arunachal in 2025. India rejected that, and Brahmaputra Mega Dam. China is building a great bend dam at the bend of Brahmaputra near the border, which will have a great impact on India's downstream water security and the disaster future ecological concerns. Indo-Bangladesh border is in news constantly because of it being a porous border with illegal immigration. Reasons again are ethnic proximity and close relations amongst the Bengalis. They are mostly they are having some kind of relationship, especially in terms of language and culture. And there is some insurgency as well as illegal immigration and smuggling of goods across this border. Then there are transboundary crimes such as cattle smuggling, fake Indian currency notes, drug trafficking, human trafficking, etc. And the latest statement of Muhammad Yunus, which described Bangladesh as the only guardian of the ocean for India's northeast, it highlighted the importance of Siliguri corridor, where a new tunnel is going to be constructed so that the future of the Siliguri corridor is secure for arms movement as well as security of the area. Approximately 2,700 km of the border has now been fenced and smart fencing has been inaugurated. Then comes the Myanmar border, where the free movement regime was scrapped by the government to reduce the drug trafficking, refugee influx and illegal immigration. There is a 31,000 crore fencing project here, which was approved by the cabinet along with construction of roads here. And this is in turmoil because of the Manipur conflict and it being a safe haven for Indian insurgents from NSC, NK and PLA post the 2021 the 2021 coup refugee influx of Myanmar. Again, this is the Vibrant Village program. You need to understand the various aspects of it. In the first phase, it was extended to villages in 19 states, and in the phase 2, It was extended to villages in 17 states. Viksit Vibrant Villages program was announced in May 25, which empowers youth to directly work with communities in 100 selected border villages, and a strategic significance where PM Modi declared the border villages to be the first villages, not the last villages. Then comes the topic of maritime security with a 11,000 kilometer coastline with 12 major and 205 minor ports in exclusive economic zone of 2 million kilometers square, 90% of trade by volume. All this is the importance of India's coast. Our policy initially was called Sagar, which focused us on being the net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. So Sagar policy talked about being India being the first responder in case of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and the net security provider to Indian Ocean region. However, now we have transitioned into the policy of Mahasagar, where we are not imposing ourselves here by calling us the net security provider. We're calling ourselves as the preferred security partner in the Indian Ocean region. So this is the policy change, and we obviously will continue to be the first responder and the biggest source of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief for any country, for all countries in the Indian Ocean. This is basically the map of India's maritime borders. It needs to be understood. It coincides with the India airspace borders, where this is the first line of the territorial waters, that is followed by the continental shelf limit, here 315 nautical miles, and this is the exclusive economic zone, which is 200 nautical miles from the baseline here. This is where the India-Myanmar and India-Thailand maritime boundaries are. This is India's exclusive economic zone limit, and these are Sri Lankan territorial waters. So this map needs to be remembered and made in your answers if there is any question on the maritime borders or maritime security. Then there are 3 levels of coastal threats that have been designated: direct attacks on population centers, smuggling of narcotics, arms, and third level is illegal immigration and refugee influx. For each, there is a proper responding force. Firstly is the Marine Police, which works within 0 to 12 nautical miles of the states. Then comes the Coast Guard, which works in the 12 to 200 nautical mile domain, and Navy works beyond the 200 nautical mile domain for security. Then for level 2, that is narcotics and smuggling, Coast Guard and Navy work, and Marine Police and Coast Guard work for refugees and illegal immigrants. These are the key maritime security initiatives. We talked about the Sagar Doctrine, security and growth for all in the region, which is India's maritime initiative for regional security and economic development. This has been updated for the Indian Ocean region, which is more proactive than Sagar. Then IFC-IOR, established by the Navy. This is the Information Fusion Center in the Indian Ocean region. This provides real-time maritime domain awareness, tracking of the vessel traffics, etc. Then the Maritime Anti-Piracy Act, which is India's domestic legal framework to combat piracy, and Operation Sankalp, which Navy did to protect Indian flagged vessels in the Persian Gulf during the Red Sea crisis. Then in terms of air defense, we have to look at various layers. That is the ballistic missile defense, the long range, the medium range, and the short range. So this is the longest and this is the shortest range, and we need to have a basic framework in mind, because in Operation Sindoor, air defense was a major point in news. It can be asked this year, it was not asked last year. So beyond 400 kilometers works the ballistic missile defense, up to 400 kilometers works the long range missiles, then 100 kilometers medium range, and up to 35 is the short range. Here the system is basically Agni missiles. For this is the S-400, also called the Sudarshan Chakra, then the Barak 8 here, and the Akash here. All these are the systems, Akash and Spider, which are basically for the short range, Barak for the medium range, S-400 for the long range. These are various different technologies having separate features. For very short is the manpads. Basically, these are handheld missile launchers. This for point defense. They are highly mobile and critical for protecting the exposed positions and highly dynamic in nature. Similarly, for surveillance is the IACCS, that is the Integrated Air Command and Control System, which integrates data from all the defense assets. It was highly useful in the Operation Sindoor. Then is Akash Tir, which is basically automated detection, tracking and engagement of enemy aircraft, drones and all air threats. Then Trigun for Indian Navy, which is for maritime domain awareness. This system integrates sea-based radars, sonars and communication nodes for in the Indian Ocean region. Then come the satellites, that is the NAVIC system, the GSAT, the RESAT series, which is satellite-based surveillance, communication and navigation. So all these are initiatives that can be asked and are needed to be remembered. This is the diagram of India's air defense system. It is multi-layered, as you can see. This is the integrated air command and control center. This is the Akash Tir system. These are for longer ranges. This is for medium. This is for shorter. This is for manpads. So these are basically the individual domains of the different air defense systems that completely guard the borders of the country. So starting from the starting to the end, this is the longest range of the defense system. This is the international border, and this is the whole border being covered by the air defense system. So this was the counter drone system and manpads. This is the long range surface to air missile. This is the medium range surface to air missile. This is the short range surface to air missile. These are the counter drones that exist and manpads, and this is the surveillance radar. So the first layer here are the counter drones. The second layer here are the point air defense short range missiles. The third layer is the medium range, and the fourth layer is the long range missiles. So this was the part for all the components of border security. There are again common issues and way forward given in your diagrams and in your content. You need to remember these for using them in any of the questions. Regarding border security forces, the questions are highly limited. There has been no direct question on any of the forces till now. Only the kind of questions that are asked or which are likely to be asked are somewhat like this. Firstly, a few years back, the roles of fewer agencies like investigative agencies and the basically the NCC, the Territorial Army, they were all asked what is the role of them. Then the bodies like the National Security Council, National Security Advisory Board, those were asked, and their response mechanism, and certain questions regarding the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So basically one needs to remember first the overall integrated multi-layered security architecture of the country, starting with the Cabinet Committee on Security at the top. So this is the topmost layer. The Cabinet Committee on Security is the topmost layer here. It is chaired by the Prime Minister, advised by the National Security Advisor along with additional and deputy National Security Advisors. So he or she advises the Prime Minister in case of any of the security issues, and the Prime Minister chairs the Cabinet Committee on Security, who have the Home Minister, Defense Minister, Finance Minister and Minister on External Affairs with them. All these comprise to form the National Security Council, along with which has the Strategic Policy Group. The Strategic Policy Group itself contains the Cabinet Secretary, the Chief of Defense Staff, the 3 Army Service Chiefs, Army, Navy, Air Force Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Home and Foreign Secretary. So this is the 2-layer. First is the National Security Council, and then is followed by the Strategic Policy Group. Within them is within the NSA or the National Security Advisor is also the National Security Advisory Board, which also consists of experts from outside and various other such members who have an expertise on security. This is followed by the National Investigation Board and the Technical Committee Group, the Technical Technology Coordination Group, and the NIB. So the NIB is basically focusing on cyber and telecom. The National Security Advisory Board is a think tank which does research, development and brings out various new methodologies in terms of security and safety. And the Technical Coordination Group, it focuses on appraisal of technology in case of the various dual use technologies like nuclear. So it appraises technology like nuclear technologies. and the rest of them consist of the National Cyber Security, Cooperation Group, and then the Military Advisor, and then the National Maritime Security Coordinator. So the National Cyber Security Coordinator, the National Maritime Security Coordinator, and the Military Advisor, they complete the whole domain of India's security architecture. So you can see this. I have zoomed it up, and this is what you need to remember if any question is asked. This is given in your material. Next, what are the various layers of security? So we can see the political layer, which is the Cabinet Committee on Security, with the state governments formulating state level policies. The MHA manages internal security. Intelligence agencies are IB, RAW, National Technical Research Organization, etc., which are complemented by the state intelligence units. Then the enforcement is by CAPFs and state police at the state level, and constitutionally the mandates are in the constitution. So each of the bodies need to be understood. The National Security Council, which is the apex body responsible for advising the Prime Minister on national security and foreign policy matters. This NSCS, that is the National Security Council Secretariat, is headed by the National Security Advisor and operates under the PMO and is the executive arm of the National Security Council. So basically, the National Security Council is supported by the National Security Council Secretariat headed by the NSA. The components are Strategic Policy Group, as we saw, then the National Security Advisory Board and the Joint Intelligence Committee. Strategic Policy Group is the interministerial groups, contains also the Vice Chairman EPIO, Cabinet Secretary, Defense and Home Secretary, and Army and Air Force and Navy Chiefs, coordinating the national security. The Security Advisory Board consists of retired officials, academics, for being used as a think tank. And the Joint Intelligence Committee, it contains representatives from IB and RAW, etc. So the Joint Intelligence Committee, it contains representatives from IB, RAW, and all the other bodies. Then the critical reforms that are needed here, we need to have a publicly codified national security strategy, which is not there. There is a quote by the External Affairs Ministers that though India does not have a codified national security strategy, still it does not mean that we do not have one. That means that it is an unwritten security strategy, whereas countries like the United States of America have a written national security account or the national security document or a national security strategy. Last year, USA published this updated national security strategy, and they said that a rules-based international order is a liberal illusion. Ultimately, it was a manifestation of their intent. Ultimately, they interfered and kidnapped the president of Venezuela in the name of crimes against humanity, and also waged a war against Iran in the Middle East. So this national security strategy document, it basically declares the intent of any of these countries. Again, we should understand that there was a Kargil Review Committee in 2000, the Nesh Chandra Committee and Defense Planning Committee. They have all recommended the formulation of this national security strategy. Then come the central intelligence agencies like Intelligence Bureau, which is India's internal security agency under MHA. It runs the multi-agency center for inter-agency sharing of information. There are issues like coordination difficulties amongst the intelligence agencies. Same for the external intelligence agency, that is the research and analysis wing, which comes under the Cabinet Secretariat or the Prime Minister's office. And then comes the National Technical Research Organization, which provides the technical intelligence, cybersecurity, satellite monitoring, etc. Again, issues are interagency rivalries and coordination issues. The Special Frontier Force, security force, is also controlled by the RNAW. Then there's something called the NAD grid. NAD grid is nothing but the counterterrorism intelligence infrastructure connecting 21 security agencies, which is operational since 2020. There are some privacy concerns, data integration challenges, etc. They have to be inculcated. Then we have to look at the general challenges facing in India's intelligence structure, like institutional turf wars. There is no intelligence czar. Basically, Naresh Chandra Task Force Committee recommended creation of a national intelligence coordinator to oversee all these agencies. It is still not implemented. Then accountability deficit is there. There is no clear accountability, no parliamentary oversight over the intelligence agencies. Then weakness in human intelligence, that is human weakness, over reliance on technical surveillance, and there is weakening of human intelligence, and ground level intelligence networks have now been quite derelict. Then there's a center state gap between the intelligence agencies and a technology gap, while the work of technology, the intelligence agencies becomes more technological. Then certain committees like the Naresh Chandra Task Force Committee recommendations need to be used in your answers. It says to create a national intelligence coordinator, establish parliamentary oversight, strengthen human capabilities, and resolve the IB raw jurisdictional issues. Then come the central investigation and enforcement agencies like CBI, NIA, ED. Along with that, FIU, IND for financial intelligence, and other state CIDs also form a part of this the investigative network of agencies. CBI, NIA, and ED we have already talked about, and they are an integral part of the overall security architecture of the country. Then the UAP Act might be asked, so we need to understand the key salient features of this. Basically, it involves designating someone as a terrorist, extending detention. Suspect can be detained up to 180 days without a trial. Then there are restrictions on bail. Bail here is not the norm, here jail is the norm, and investigation by NIA is statutorily mandated. Then the issues exist, such as there are very broad definitions, and these make it vague and subjective. Conviction rates are only very low, 2.2%. There are prolonged detentions and lack of procedural safeguards. Then come the issue of all the central armed police forces for every border. These are various security agencies that guard the specific borders. The exact details you can easily remember from the PDF. You don't have to go through all of this. There is nothing to explain in this. Every border has one agency. The concept is one border, one force. That has to be quoted in your answers. Then the role of armed forces in internal security was asked. Regarding the AFSPA also, it is an act which mandates the army to carry out certain operations in areas designated as disturbed areas. So once an area is designated as a disturbed area under this act, then the army has the right to operate within that area and carry out operations. It grants the power to use force, including lethal force, in disturbed areas, and empowers the security force to conduct search without warrants, permits detention, and provides legal immunity to forces acting in good faith. Issues, again, the Jeevan Reddy Committee and Santosh Hegde Committee recommended the repeal of this. Supreme Court mandated a minimum force and accountability and no blanket immunity. And there was a partial revocation in Nagaland, which sparked by the Oting killings in 2021. So, various agencies and various bodies are against the AFSPA Act. However, it is needed in disturbed areas. There are some implications of excess deployment which need to be understood. There is the issue of civil administration atrophy, because the civilian administration and police then get alienated and lose the capacity and motivation to develop their own abilities. Then there is the alienation of local population, AFSPA dependency. The people and the law and order becomes dependent on the army, and there is a blurring of civil military roles, and mission creep comes in, where forces trained for conventional warfare become stretched and then they lose their efficiency. Way forward here in this case is nothing but civil military fusion, which is a theory or philosophy which says that the civilian forces need to act in conjunction and in collaboration with the military forces. Then there is a new issue of integrated theater commands, that the land, air, and sea domains are highly separated right now in the country, but the threats that are emanating today are all multidimensional and require coordination amongst all three of them. So rather than working in silos, they have to work together. For that, new command structure has been made called the integrated theater commands, wherein there will be a unit of army, air force, and navy all operating together. For that, there is the Northern Theater Command, the Western Theater Command, and the operational timeline here is they're expected to be phased in by 2026 and operational fully by 27. The Inter-Services Organization Act 2023 gives the legal mandate and gives the legal backing to this integrated theatre command issue. Then come the individual state police forces. There are common challenges like understaffing, modernization, quality of investigation, political interference, human rights concerns that are faced by these internal police forces. If any of the question comes on the internal police, they can be used as the challenges. Data is given here like police personnel per lakh population is 137, far lower than UN mandate of 181. And there is a 25% vacancy rate. Funding is inadequate. Conviction rate is just 47% and criminalization occurs along with things like custodial deaths. Then the Prakash Singh case of Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court directed the formulation of state security commissions, which are autonomous bodies to ensure independence of police from the state government. And then police establishment boards, police complaints authority, DGP selection and tenure has to be from top 3 senior most officers with the minimum 2-year tenure and separation of investigation and law enforcement. Police is overburdened with both investigation and law enforcement, and it cannot do these two highly specialized functions. Then there is the new trend of women in India's defense and security forces who are being now increasingly given combat roles. Regarding that, the Supreme Court judgments and the various initiatives can be asked by the examiner, so you need to remember this. Finally comes the talk about reforming India's security architecture. So we'll divide it into intelligence reform, implement the Naresh Chandra task force, establish parliamentary standing committee of intelligence, strengthen the multi-agency center for intelligence, rebuild human, then investigation and legal reforms, a dedicated CBI act which should have statutory independence, UAPA should not be misused, conviction rates should be improved for various internal security laws, the CAPF and police need to be reformed, the dual employment strain should be basically reduced by separating the border security battalions from internal security pools. Then there is also the issue of the IPS officers being appointed as the heads of CAPFs. That is still under discussion by the judiciary, and the legal route has been taken. Then Prakash Singh committee's recommendation have to be followed, like passing a Central Police Act as a model for state police and states and creating enforceable standards at the national level. Then police modernization, scaling of community policing needs to be done so that police becomes an integral part of the society and there is greater trust. ASPA needs to be rationalized. There should be measurable security benchmarks like incident rates, surrender rates and normalization indicators for ASPA to be operational here. And accountability should be strengthened by making mandatory magisterial inquiry and investing in police capacity building rather than over-reliance on armed forces. And for armed forces, theaterization is the way to go. Integrated theater commands, higher defense indigenization, and having a clear policy where specialization is in favor in terms of technology should be there. And there should be a published national security strategy according to the recommendations of all the various committees. These are the recent developments. They're all common. There is, in terms of border security, the BSF has AI-enabled surveillance drones today. Integrated theater commands now are formally designated, not fully operational yet. Maharashtra ATS bust an ISS module in 2025. Women got permanent commission in Coast Guard by Supreme Court. And NAT grade got expanded, and that thing is still outgoing for counter-intelligence investment for expanding the counter-intelligence infrastructure framework. So this is the complete data and issues and way forward for this whole topic. The questions here are quite limited and they need to be understood from a perspective of what is asked. You don't have to go into much detail into the roles into the various details of facts about the internal security forces here. In this topic, you just need to know the macro issues, and there can be specialized questions on certain topics, which if you remember them and if you're able to read them and predict them, then you will have a good grasp on answering them. But if the question is highly specific, then it will be tough for you to answer them. However, the issues and the way forward remain common. You just have to understand the problem at hand and try to give logical points and value added points such as given in the material. The nature of mains has been changing, prelims has been becoming more vague, and mains has been becoming now more and more specific. The questions are too specific, and that is why there is a clear bimodality in GS3 where either you get 60 marks or you get 100 marks. Why? Because there are no generic questions. So, no scope for marking in a generic way. If you know, then you get marks. If you don't know, you don't get marks. That is the harsh nature of GS3. So, hopefully, focusing on the PYQs, ensuring that you have enough information and data is probably going to be your hope for getting good marks in GS3. With all of this, internal security should be well covered by you. Use the material, condense it into shorter notes, ensure that the committee recommendations, data and all are highlighted, various dimensions you're able to open up using the various theories and various multidimensional approaches as we have discussed. Ensure that you give some theoretical backing. For example, Naxalism should be seen as a developmental problem. The linkage between development and extremism should be explained in the cycle, and so on. So if you ensure that, you are sure to get good marks and update yourself with current affairs for even a better outcome. Hopefully, it was a good session for you. Keep revising and keep writing answers and ensure that you're able to generate the maximum points possible, value adding with diagrams, case studies, and all the various examples that are given. So, thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next class.